This is the Studio Stack podcast where we go behind the scenes and talk to industry leaders about what it takes to build, join, and invest in startup studios. I am your host, Deanna Lesage, and this podcast is your Startup Studio Masterclass. Today on the show, we have Wa'il Ashshowwaf, a co-founder and CEO of Unstuck Labs. Wa'il is an impact-focused leader, award-winning creative designer, and experienced startup founder. In 2017, he launched Unstuck Labs, a startup studio dedicated to supporting underrepresented founders and specializing in software development. He also serves as CEO of Rights, a social justice platform created to help end police violence. Wa'il has over 20 years of experience across corporate, philanthropic, and growth ventures, including Pepsi, Walt Disney, HSBC, and the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, just to name a few. In today's episode, we talk about why studios should develop multiple streams of engagement for entrepreneurs, how accelerators differ from venture studios, and what a potential partnership between the two could look like, what studios help founders with, and how to test EIRs before they join the studio, and the importance of developing your studio mentorship network. I've known Wa'il for a while now. He's even coached me through some of my own startup challenges, so I'm lucky to consider him a friend and mentor. You're in for a great show today, so without further ado, let's dive in. Hello. Hi, Wa'il. Thank you for coming on the Studio Stack podcast.
Hi. So good to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm so excited for this episode. Thank you for coming on. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, and I've been looking forward to this episode all week. So ready to get to it.
That is awesome. All right, great. Let's just dive straight in. First question, what is your definition of a startup studio?
So startup studio simply is a organization that takes an idea and turns it into a venture that has a product, customer, and capital. So actually launching the whole startup.
Absolutely. And how do you think about a startup studio in context of ideas in parallel, one idea, many? What's your kind of take on that? And I know we'll get into in a little bit about kind of accelerators and how you can build, many ideas at the same time and things, but just as a general definition of startup studio, what's your take on how many ideas to work on it at one time?
I think of a startup studio more like a funnel. Like you start at the top with like a lot of ideas, and then you laser focus on a few to get to actually launch them and build them out.
Yeah, absolutely. And so tell me about the studio evolution. So you're founder of Unstuck Labs, and I know, I've known actually about the studio for a long time. We've worked together on some things through the studio and around, and so I know a little bit, but tell everyone else about the evolution of the studio from kind of launch to today, and then a little bit about how you went, digital when COVID hit and kind of all of those things.
Yeah, so it's been an interesting journey. It started out with one simple premise: can we help founders? And myself and my co-founder were talking to a lot of founders. We were mentoring them, and a lot of these founders were already part of existing accelerator programs, but we realized that they always had the same recurring gap, which is either the technical implementation of how to take their idea and actually build it. So we started out just being advisors, and from there we ended up building a digital studio that actually had developers on staff and designers on staff to actually build the products that these entrepreneurs were launching. And then from there, we decided that we wanted to build our own startups. And so we evolved into working with founders to build their startups and building our own startups as well. And obviously COVID also kicked us off into, another evolution, but really went from focusing, on the basics of the founder to building products to then bringing it all together.
Yeah. And that's definitely something I wanted to touch on, because I think you as a studio have a really unique model. And so when I'm looking at the, kind of everything that I know about you and looking at the website, I can see that there's kind of three paths that you could take as a founder looking to work with Unstuck. So you can join the accelerator program live. And I want to ask you a couple questions about that. Like, is it cohort? Sure. Is it ad hoc? But then the other option is to join the kind of the self-paced online program, which you call Unstuck Anywhere, which I just love that name. And then the third path is to work with Unstuck in more of a kind of an agency model to build out an app or your MVP prototype. So one, is that right? Are there kind of three paths there, or do you see less or more? And then secondly, what are the advantages to having multiple systems of engagement for different levels of support?
Yeah, so you're spot on. Those three paths are exactly what we're providing. And really, they were born out of our desire to keep engaged with founders and not turn people away, because people need help at different stages and different capacities. So, for example, if you're a founder that has already committed to building a startup, usually maybe you had a failure, you show that you can persevere, then the actual in live program, being part of the studio, is a really good option. But it's also selective, right? So not all founders get selected for that program.
Right.
Then we have founders that come in and they're way too early, meaning that, for example, one of the biggest misconceptions they have is how much effort and time is required to actually build a startup, right? They're kind of in this dream phase where, like, this is amazing, I want to do it, I think. And so for founders that are in that stage, Unstuck Anywhere is perfect because it's at your pace, but it's still designed in a way that's not all digital. So you can actually get help from a live person that can guide you along the way. So it's a good in between
Right.
For those. And then obviously, we for the digital agency, if you're a founder that's kind of like, I just want someone to do the technical piece for me, design, look at things, I'm ready to go, and you've already done a lot. Usually, these are either later stage, and I call them a startup rescue mission, where they've kind of done some work, and then they're like, okay, I need some additional help, and they come to us to build products, and that's kind of
I
like
like that. I like that. Side note, kind of, I like that as a model on this startup rescue mission. I think there's a lot of companies that are, were maybe hacked together in the beginning or didn't really know what was kind of going on at the beginning, or hadn't figured out the business model, and now are at a stage of maybe potential growth, but they have this kind of broken back end or disconnected systems. So I like that, like, startup rescue mission. I noticed that on the website and I was like, oh, that's cool.
No, thank you. It's interesting. One of the insights we had, you'd think that founders always are looking for more resources, but actually the opposite is true. There are too many resources available for founders to build and launch their product, and it's overwhelming. So often the problem that we're faced with is people come like, I think I need a marketing agency. Where do I find one? Which one? There's so many. How do I build my app? Which option do I take? So the expertise is where the value comes in of really helping guide people on, like, either work frames that have worked or trusted partners that they can work with.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking a little bit about partners, I think that there's an interesting overlap, or kind of a supplementary ecosystem where accelerators and studios exist together in partnership. And I think we've spoken about this a little bit before. And then, I'm seeing more and more that startup studios and venture studios are building accelerators into the program. And so I would love for you to talk a little bit about kind of the comparison between accelerators and studios, and how they can work together if that's an opportunity, what that partnership might look like.
Yeah, the way I like to think about accelerators and startup studios is in the way that they meet the founders' needs, right? And if I think of it in terms of accelerators are providing community,
Yep.
they're providing coaching, they're providing capital, right? A lot of them are. And then they're also helping with founders to grow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Growth. But there's a couple of things that they're missing out of that, capital, community, coaching, which is the actual creation and completion of the startup.
Right. So, like, building the actual product.
Yes, right. So if you're in an accelerator, they're going to teach you how, and they're going to give you all the resources to do it, but they're not necessarily going to do it with you, right? Whereas a startup studio, we're actually going to go in and say, okay, well, we need to go meet customers. Let's go meet customers together. Oh, we need to build the product. Come, let's build it here. We have a team, a bench that's actually going to do it with you.
Yeah,
So
you
we're
guys
a
actually do it.
co-founder.
You guys have a really fast. What did I see? Like three weeks to an MVP, or six?
So we can do it within 6 weeks. We can get you to an MVP usually. The biggest hurdle is getting the founders and us on the same page on what it means to have an MVP.
Right. Right.
But once that's there, that's part of like the process. Then it's not too hard to get the MVP out.
Right. And I think that that is something, to your point around accelerators, there's a difference between having a playbook and execution. And so I think there's a lot that you can do with network and connections and mentorship and playbooks. But at the end of the day, the biggest hurdle a founder is going to have to overcome is the building of the product. And it doesn't need to be a highly technical, product. Even something as simple as putting up a landing page and design,
Hmm.
that you can probably do, but how do you assess the responses? How do you know what to change and build hypotheses around experiments and things, which I think, studios, especially builder studios, are very, very good at understanding those analytics and the back end of things and what to put in place now so that there's a scalability later. And so how do you think studios and accelerators could or should work together given that, kind of juxtaposition?
Yeah, to your point, most accelerators are really focused on getting the founder all the resources they can to succeed. But then they always have this gap, and the way they've traditionally tried to fill this gap is like we've given them capital, they'll go figure that out with our guidance,
Got it.
right? So I would suggest that there's a more optimal solution, which is find them the partner that's going to help fill in that gap, so that the use of capital is much more focused. So I've met founders that have spent $10,000 on logos, business cards, and T-shirts,
That's
right? Before they've had a customer, before they've had anything, right? So that's not the best way to use your capital if you want to.
Absolutely. And I don't really think that accelerators can govern use of funds as much. And that's an interesting kind of side point as well, because with studios, you really have an investing co-founder when there's that kind of opportunity where it's a studio that's investing in the company. You have this kind of investing co-founder relationship where they're going to advise you on the use of funds, and that hopefully not on, business cards and t-shirts, but that's actually a really good point.
Yeah, whenever we have founders that we're working, it's interesting. At the beginning of the journey and the end of the journey, we have similar points. And what I mean is, usually when a startup comes to apply, we tell them like, okay, can you get a customer? And usually like, what do you mean? I don't even have a product. I don't have anything. And one of the requirements to join the studio is for you to get some either like an LOI signed,
That's
get some
cool.
pre
I like
up.
that.
Usually, if at that point they're like, "Oh no, I can't do that. That's doesn't. I'm uncomfortable talking to people." That's like, okay, you need more work to get to that stage. But the ones that jump on and say like, "Okay, fine, show me how." That's amazing. They deliver. Then by the end of the journey, we deliver by making sure that what we've created for them gets them a customer. So it starts with the customer, kind of ends with the customer at both ends.
I love that. And I do a lot of work in the venture studio ecosystem, kind of coming from an ops background and like, kind of the systems design thing. I'm always finding myself designing programs and typically the EIR, because I love to be founder facing,
Nice.
the EIR programs inside of studios. And that's one of the key elements of any successful studio design strategy is your, I don't know what to call it, testing mechanism for intake of new founders or EIRs. And that's a really
Yeah.
good, I haven't put that in as far as something to look for. It's all, founder aptitude and all of that kind of, I've developed other tests, but I think that that's a really critical one. And I'm going to be using that in the future for sure, because that's great.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a good way to get the founders uncomfortable early on, and
And yeah, and just throw them in the water and just see, because the founders that are going to succeed will absolutely be the ones to just go out and kind of get a first customer. I've used the kind of the litmus test of go get on 5 problem discovery calls with people in your network.
yeah,
So one, I want to see if they're passionate enough about the idea to tell it to people that they already know, and then two, if anybody that they already know will jump on the phone with them and kind of talk through a problem discovery call, means they probably have some good amount of social capital and credentials in the social space. So I think that's a kind of a good one, but I could talk about that all day.
I like it.
Um, and so talking about like how you build companies and the types of companies you've built, I think I would love to hear the story of a portfolio company that's gone through Unstuck and like what the process is like. Because I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience that are listening and thinking like, how do I approach this studio? And so I think if you tell the story of a startup that's gone through the studio, You can do internal idea or external founder based built startup, and then I think that will answer a lot of questions around like how to approach the studio.
Sure. So there's a startup called Prize, Pryze, that we work with. And so when founders come, there's a couple of things we look for in the founder. One, for them personally, are they willing to persevere? So is there an indication that they've either, tried to work on this on their own, reached a certain point and got stuck, they had a failure point, whatever that is. Second, we look at the actual founders and the problem they're solving, right? If that problem is something that's big enough, scalable enough to actually be a business.
Like
And then third, we look at the solution they've developed if it's based on a unique insight that they got. Right? The actual idea for us is the least important at this point because we're so early on, and often they want to focus on the idea. So with Prize, for example, they had been operating a franchise of cookie stores for several years, and they realized the pain point, which is when they weren't there, their staff were on their mobile phones. And then either that would lead to bad customer service or they're burning the cookies, but they didn't know how to keep them off their phones.
Don't burn the cookies.
Yeah, exactly, right? And I remember one story they told us, like, we're watching them through these, cameras that we put to monitor the employees, but I'm at another store. What am I going to do? By the time, they've ignored the customer or the cookies burned, I'm going to call them and, it didn't work. So their insight from operating those was like, there has to be a better way. And they had actually worked on launching the solution and reached kind of a point where they were stuck. And that's when they came to us to say, like, we really want to build this. We believe in it. We've invested some time and money, and we're ready to go all in. And so when we gave them that first litmus test of like, okay, let's go get LOIs and come back and talk to us, they didn't hesitate. They completely knocked it out the park.
Nice.
Right? The only thing they needed was the framework on like how to actually get that done. So once they came in the program, they came in with no product. They had the idea. So then we started doing all the groundwork to build them, pitch deck. We built their first MVP of their product in 8 weeks.
What was the product? Just out of curiosity, like
it's
employee monitoring system or?
No, it's really clever. Basically, when employees go to work, they open up the app, and as long as they're not using their phone to do anything else, they're getting points. And at the end of the shift, they can cash in those points, and you can trade it for like AirPods, spa days, travel,
free cookies?
Movie tickets, cookies.
No, my first job, total side note, but one of my first jobs ever was at Subway. And I think I didn't last long. I think I got fired within like 9 days or something. It was a record.
Oh my God.
But I had my like free cookie fill. Like I think I was genuinely working for cookies.
Oh my God.
But total side note. Cool. Yeah. No, I was just in my mind trying to picture what would that product look like.
Yeah. So basically, they have all the different prizes. So any business that has customer-facing employees, or if there's like or a production line, or like think of a school bus driver where they're not supposed to be on their phone, things like that. So within they were in the program for 12 weeks. Within 8 weeks, they had a product that they actually went and got a paying customer with.
Within 8 weeks?
Within 8 weeks.
Wow. That is...
Yeah, but they were physically like 5 days a week in our workspace working with our team.
That's the other thing we forgot to mention too. Unstuck has an actual physical workspace, which is very cool, by the way. I've been in DC.
We do, when COVID hit, we've kind of shut that down temporarily. And when things open back up, we'll relaunch that. But yeah, we love having the physical space. I don't think there's really a substitute for the synergy that happens when everyone's together.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, and then during the time they were there, they were able to raise their first capital as well. But the whole reason they were able to get these results is because there was a process to follow. There was a time commitment where they were there and we were working together, and we were building it with them. So when it was like, oh, you have to go pitch, oh, we helped them find the person that they're gonna pitch to. Then we built the pitch deck together, like physically designing it, explaining what goes into it, and then we taught them how to execute it. They
Yeah.
put in the effort and the talent and the know-how, so it made everything much faster. So that's kind of like the magic of a startup studio. It's not like you sit through a class and you're like, oh, this is social media marketing 101, and you walk out and try to figure it out.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think that there's a place where studios need to, there's a place for strategy for sure. And that's very important because as, a first time founder pitching to investors, like that has stopped more founders than it has, probably anything else. Just that fear of pitching to investors or talking to first customers. If you don't have someone championing you or basically saying like, you're required to do this, almost like a teacher at school or something. Like there's an expectation that you'll do this. It's easy to just put it off till next week or the week after. So I love that the accountability piece and the strategy piece is very important. But the other, very critical component of a studio is the kind of hands-on work. Founders can't do absolutely everything. So whatever the studio is in a good position to take on, like a design, because your studio has really beautiful, design and designers on staff and things with. So whenever there's an opportunity for studio to take on and kind of own an area or, hands on boots on the ground, build something with the founder, I think that's a really huge value add. And very different from any other model. VCs super, super hands off. Accelerators definitely don't do that. Incubators, even less so. So studios are in a really unique position there.
And you had asked me earlier about do we do it in cohorts or do we
Oh
do it?
yeah, yeah.
So what's interesting, we started off in cohorts, but then we transitioned to a rolling enrollment dates.
Hmm.
So the reason we did that is we found the way because we were so intentional with how we worked with founders, is when we did that, then the first company that came in for that period would be like 1 or 2 weeks ahead of the next company, and they
Yep.
would be able to help them.
I love that.
And then like so if we ended up like having 4 or 5 companies within one cohort, then each one is a little bit ahead, so they're each helping each other out at different stages, right? So they
That's
get to
awesome.
learn and incorporate.
And is that how you operate now?
Yes,
Right. Okay. So there's rolling deadlines. Is that what it is? It's
yes.
okay, cool. And so if you apply by this deadline, you'll be in consideration for kind of this cohort, or are you accepting one entrepreneur kind of at a time in a rolling deadline?
So no, so we usually the way we do it is like we're going to say we're going to have a cohort for the second quarter of this year,
Hmm.
and there's going to be 6 startups in there. You can apply up to, for example, end of May, and then you'll get a start date within that period.
Got it. Got it. No, I mean it's very important. I would say, the network of a startup studio is not to be overlooked, and I think it often is by founders because you hear this word community and network so often it loses some of its value. But venture studios are very, very good at speeding things up because they have these networks, and Unstuck is not an exception to that. You have an incredible mentor network, which has some really powerful partners in it, including Maurice, who we both know and are great friends with. Shout out to Maurice. So that's kind of something that I encourage all studios to formulate super early on, and they call it different things, from like a board to an advisor to counsel. But at the end of the day, it's just kind of like your network of advisors, product testers, and kind of mentors. What is your advice to emerging studios? Because there's a lot of kind of operators in the audience, to developing this kind of mentorship network.
Yeah, I'd say do 2 things. One, create a opening to invite people into your network. Make it really easy. So like for us, we just hosted a startup meetup every single Tuesday for 2 years. We did like 100 meetups, open house where people just came in and we just helped them. We weren't trying to sell them or convert them, just purely to build that network. The second is when you're engaging with your startups and founders, make it always about them, not you as an organization. Because the reason mentors want to help an organization is they see the work that you're doing and they see the stories of others. So the more you can make it about the mentors in your network, your startups, the more likely you'll attract more mentors.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think of the same for deal flow and that was going to be like kind of one of my other questions too is what is how do you said that it's kind of a funnel right at the beginning of the episode you were talking about kind of this funnel and ideas come through and then it kind of narrows down. What would you say is kind of lead gen at the top of the funnel for you, or how do you think about like getting the types of founders in at the top that you want? Because I know that there's a variety of ways the studios do this, and this is like kind of a hot topic in the space.
Well, the meetup has been a great source of leads for us. But the other really good source is back to our network. Is we support a lot of other accelerator programs in the area, whether like as mentors or in different capacities. They have always been an excellent source because they have people applying to them that doesn't quite fit what they're doing,
I
but they're
see.
able to identify and move them to us, or people that have graduated from their program and they bring them to us to kind of go do that, create and complete phase.
I think that's really interesting as feeder systems. I talk about this a lot when I'm thinking through, VC, how traditional venture capital can work with studios. And I think about it more as a feeder system, I guess, rather than a partnership. Like this kind of studios come in at super, super early idea stage and then kind of give this like a product spins up, a studio kind of spins out a venture, and now it's ready for venture capital. That's
Mm-hmm.
interesting because I don't know. So do you think that studios would be a good feeder system for accelerators, or accelerators would be a good feeder system for studios, or both? I mean, I could see it working both ways, but curious to hear what you think.
Yeah, I look at it like a revolving door kind of
Yeah.
until the startup's ready to be on their own. But there's no one startup studio or accelerator that can handle all founders,
Right.
right? All types of founders. So having those networks is invaluable. So I think startup studios can be feeders for accelerators,
Yeah.
especially founders that have like they're now investor ready, they have their first product, and this accelerator is doing post seed or Series A, right? Perfect. And we actually have examples of an accelerator program not accepting a startup until they verified they've been through our program. They told them if you can verify,
Oh,
we'll let you in.
I like that too. I think that's a good kind of litmus test for them as well. I think more accelerators should work with studios, especially builder studios that have this kind of software engineer kind of design capability. You guys run a lot of product tests. You're able to help them vet, get first customers and things. And I think, yeah, it's a great opportunity for accelerators to work with studios. I hope that, there's some accelerators in the audience that reach out to Unstuck and try to, form some partnerships because I think it's super valuable. But speaking of, where kind of the audience can go to learn more and reach out to you, how would you like people to kind of get in touch if it's an entrepreneur trying to pitch, if it's a corporate that's interested in building a startup or an accelerator, where should
Yeah,
they go?
we recently launched a Unstuck app on the App Store. So
Really?
if you just look up Unstuck anywhere, we will pop up right there. But on there, you can connect with us directly. You can message me, ask me any questions, and we have all our information on there. So that's a great source, as well as our website unstucklabs.com.
That is awesome. I did not know you had an app. Incredible. When do you sleep, by the way?
Yeah, I know. I hit the flow state, and I feel like I'm always working, but work doesn't feel like work.
Oh
It's
my
fun.
goodness. That is incredible. And yes, I will leave links in the show notes to the app and the website and your LinkedIn or kind of Unstuck's LinkedIn. But thank you so much for coming on the show. It was really a pleasure to chat. Always enjoy it.
Thank you so much, Deanna. It's been great. Look forward to seeing all the great work that you're doing.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on.
See you.